Humanity had reached its pinnacle. Across the vast expanse of space, they had built cities on distant worlds, constructed megastructures that dwarfed anything nature had ever created, and mastered technologies that bent the very fabric of reality. The cradle of their civilization, Earth, stood as a monument to their ingenuity, a beacon of progress that shone across the stars. For centuries, they had explored, expanded, and uplifted lesser civilizations, believing themselves to be architects of a new, unified galactic order. Then came the Zalvith. They arrived not as allies, not as seekers of knowledge, but as conquerors. Towering warships, bristling with weapons unseen in human archives, emerged from the depths of space. Their envoys spoke in honeyed words, cloaked in deceit, presenting themselves as diplomats while their fleets encircled human colonies like vultures awaiting a corpse. The Galactic Concord, the governing body of human expansion, extended a hand in friendship. The Zalvith accepted it with one hand while readying a dagger with the other. The attack came without warning. In a single night, human space burned. The outermost colonies, home to billions, were the first to fall. Zalvith strike forces obliterated planetary defenses before ground troops descended, their biomechanical forms slaughtering all in their path. Civilians, soldiers, leaders, it made no difference. They did not conquer. They exterminated. Earth mobilized, calling upon its great armada. Hundreds of fleets, each carrying the full might of human warfare, surged forth to meet the invaders. They fought with the tenacity that had once allowed their ancestors to rise from the dust of an ancient world. Battles raged in the cold vacuum of space, starships clashing in brutal duels that turned planets into graveyards. The Zalvith, though powerful, found themselves facing an enemy that did not surrender, that did not break. But humanity was not prepared for the full force of the Zalvith dominion. For every human fleet that was lost, more Zalvith ships took their place. Their numbers seemed infinite, their war machines relentless. Humanity's finest tacticians devised desperate strategies, each one buying mere days, mere hours before the inevitable. The fall came system by system, each world a scar upon humanity's once thriving domain. Then the unthinkable. Earth, the heart of civilization, the birthplace of all human life, became the next target. For centuries, it had stood unchallenged, its defenses impenetrable. But nothing could have prepared it for what was to come. Zalvith dreadnoughts, the size of moons, loomed over the planet, their weapons aimed downward. The people of Earth watched in horror as the sky ignited with fire. The bombardment lasted for days. Cities that had stood for thousands of years crumbled in moments. The oceans boiled, the land fractured, and the very atmosphere burned. Billions perished, their screams lost in the inferno. The last transmissions from Earth were desperate cries for help, calls that no one could answer. The Zalvith did not stop until Earth was a lifeless husk, a shadow of its former glory. In the depths of space, the survivors watched helplessly. Scattered remnants of the human fleet, refugees fleeing in vessels meant for exploration, not war. They could do nothing but run, carrying the last embers of their race into the void. The Zalvith, satisfied with their genocide, turned their attention elsewhere, leaving behind only destruction. Humanity was no more, they declared, a species wiped from existence, a cautionary tale for any who dared challenge the dominion. But the Zalvith had made a fatal mistake. They believed humanity was finished. They believed wrong. The silence of deep space became humanity's grave and its cradle. What remained of the species drifted among the stars, scattered and broken. There were no homeworlds left, no fleets to rally, no leaders to guide them. The Zalvith had burned it all away, leaving behind only the exiled, the hunted, the forgotten. Survival became the only law. The first years were the hardest. Food was scarce, air recycled until it stung the lungs, and hope faded with each passing day. Some gave in to despair, their ships powering down, their crews accepting the void as their tomb. Others turned on their own, desperate hands willing to steal, betray, kill for a few more days of existence. But among the dying embers, a fire still burned. The few who refused to surrender took charge. Scientists, engineers, soldiers, anyone who had knowledge worth saving. They gathered what little humanity had left and fled deeper into the unknown, seeking sanctuary in the blackness beyond charted space. The remnants of their technology, once built for exploration and diplomacy, were repurposed for survival. It took centuries to rebuild. Generations were born and died aboard ships, never knowing a homeworld. Only the metal walls of their ancestors escape. Their history became legend, whispered in dark corridors where children listened with wide, unblinking eyes. They did not know Earth, but they knew what was taken from them. Over time, the weak were weeded out. Those who could not endure perished. Those who did became something new, something more. Humanity was no longer a race of dreamers and scholars. They had become warriors. Their ships, once meant for peaceful exploration, became war machines. Their bodies, once soft and frail, were strengthened through necessity. Genetics were engineered, cybernetics integrated, AI fused into their very existence. The humans that had fled the Zalvith were no longer the same species. They had evolved into something deadlier, something relentless. And they had never forgotten. They watched from the shadows as the Zalvith expanded, growing fat and complacent. The mighty war machine that had crushed humanity now ruled the galaxy, its arrogance blinding it to the danger that lurked in the dark. Empires built on blood always rot from within. The Zalvith, believing themselves unchallenged, grew decadent, lazy. That was when humanity began to strike. It started as whispers, a Zalvith outpost, wiped clean with no trace of the attackers. A supply convoy, lost in the void, its escorts disabled without a single distress signal. A governor's fortress, reduced to ruin overnight, its defenses overridden by an intelligence no one could track. The Dominion called them ghosts, anomalies, statistical errors. The Zalvith refused to believe that their old enemy still existed. But as the attacks escalated, their denial turned to suspicion, then fear. Their borders shrank, their trade routes disrupted, their worlds cut off. Then the message came, a simple transmission, sent across all Zalvith-controlled space. 3,000 years of silence, broken by a single declaration. We are still here. The Zalvith laughed at first. They dismissed the message as the work of pirates or rebels, insignificant threats beneath their notice. But the attacks did not stop. They grew bolder, deadlier. Entire fleets vanished without a trace. Military outposts were found reduced to drifting husks, their databases wiped, their crews slaughtered with surgical precision. The Dominion's arrogance began to crack. Their intelligence networks scrambled to find the source, but humanity had mastered the art of war in the shadows. The Zalvith, used to fighting overwhelming battles of brute force, found themselves prey to an enemy that struck from nowhere and left nothing behind. They responded with full military deployments, chasing ghosts through empty systems, spreading their forces thin in desperation. Then humanity made their presence undeniable. A Zalvith core world, one of their oldest, most fortified planets, ceased all communications. The Dominion sent an armada to investigate, expecting to find a minor rebellion. What they found was annihilation. The capital city, once teeming with millions, was reduced to a silent ruin. Every defense system was offline. The planetary shield, thought to be impenetrable, lay shattered. Zalvith war machines stood intact but lifeless, their command systems overridden by an intelligence beyond their understanding. The sky was darkened by human warships, ships the Zalvith had never seen before, sleek, angular constructs designed for one purpose: extermination. The Zalvith armada opened fire. They expected resistance. They expected a battle. But the war humanity had prepared for was not fought with brute strength. It was fought with precision, with knowledge, with vengeance sharpened over millennia. Within minutes, the Zalvith fleet was dismantled. Their ships, built to crush primitive enemies, were torn apart by weapons that cut through their armor like paper. The humans fought without hesitation, without mercy. They did not offer surrender, did not take prisoners. The Zalvith, who had once prided themselves as conquerors, now understood fear. Across the Dominion, panic spread. The impossible had happened, humanity had returned. The High Command, once so assured of their supremacy, now saw the truth. Their great empire had grown soft, dependent on the myth that their greatest enemy was gone forever. That myth had been shattered. They mobilized everything. Every warship, every soldier, every last resource was thrown into one final campaign, to crush humanity before it was too late. But it was already too late. Humanity had not returned to fight a war. They had come to end one. The Zalvith threw everything they had into the final war. Fleets darkened the stars. Billions of soldiers mobilized. Weapons of unimaginable destruction were unleashed. Every battle doctrine, every strategy they had ever used was deployed in desperation. They believed their numbers, their technology, their empire would save them. Didn't. Humanity had spent 3,000 years preparing for this moment. Every weakness of the Zalvith had been catalogued. Every blind spot exploited. The war was not fought in chaotic skirmishes or drawn-out sieges. It was executed with the precision of a blade striking a vital artery. Supply chains were severed, industrial worlds left in ruins before a single ship could be built. Strategic command centers fell silent one by one, their leaders assassinated, their war plans stolen before they could be enacted. Entire legions of Zalvith soldiers found themselves stranded, cut off from reinforcements, their communications reduced to desperate cries into the void. The Zalvith, who had once seen humans as primitive, as inferior, now faced something beyond their worst nightmares. The humans that had returned were not the same species they had once crushed. They did not fight for survival. They fought for revenge. And revenge did not negotiate. One by one, the core worlds of the Dominion fell. Planets that had stood for millennia, symbols of Zalvith supremacy, were turned to smoldering wastelands. The Zalvith High Command, once so sure of their invincibility, fractured under the weight of inevitable extinction. In the final days, when their empire lay in ruin, the last of the Zalvith leadership sent a desperate message across the stars. A plea for mercy, for surrender, for anything that would let them survive. The response came in the same cold, unfeeling transmission humanity had sent at the beginning. We are still here. And then the Zalvith were no more. The war was over. The Zalvith were nothing more than a memory. Their empire erased as if it had never existed. Their cities lay in ruin, their fleets reduced to drifting wreckage. There were no survivors, no remnants hiding in the darkness, no chance of resurgence. Humanity had ensured that. But victory was not celebration. The war had defined them for so long that its end felt hollow. Vengeance had been fulfilled, yet it had not brought peace. The species that had once dreamed of exploration, of unity, of enlightenment, had become something else. They had evolved into executioners, architects of destruction who had reshaped themselves for the sole purpose of annihilation. And now, there was no enemy left to fight. The fleets, built for war, drifted in silence. Soldiers, bred for battle, stood without purpose. The great minds that had orchestrated humanity's return saw the future stretched before them. A future without conflict, without direction. Some argued for expansion, for the conquest of all remaining civilizations to ensure that humanity would never be threatened again. Others called for retreat, to vanish into the stars and leave the galaxy behind. But neither felt right. Humanity had spent too long surviving, too long fighting. It was time to build again. They did not seek to rule, nor did they seek absolution. The galaxy would remember what had happened. The name of humanity would not be spoken in whispers of weakness or sympathy. It would be spoken with the weight of what they had done, of what they had become. And so, they moved forward, not as conquerors, not as saviors, but as something new. A force that would never be ignored, never be forgotten. The galaxy had learned a truth that could never be erased. Humanity was still here, and they always would be,